Good
Morning,
morning.
Jericho.
Good morning, sir. This is Coffee with the Summerland Kids. I'm Jericho Wagon. This is Aaron Riggs.
And this
Here
is
it's
coffee.
this is coffee, and we're drinking it. It's this is episode 66 of Coffee with the Summerland Kids, and today it's currently 62 degrees with a high of 80. But there's a high fog or some sort of fog advisory, like a dense fog advisory for Summerland.
Oh, poor guys. Getting that
I know. What are you
marine
gonna do?
layer.
Have some clam chowder and enjoy your your 62-degree morning, your dream sequence in Summerland.
Yeah, we're almost we're above 80.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, thankfully you guys survived the fire. You kept, you know, um, our show goes live every morning, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and we were able to consistently flow through the extreme situation that your town was going through with the Thompson fire, right? Is that the name of the fire, the Thompson fire?
It was the Thompson fire, yes, sir.
Yep, that's pretty
Not
crazy,
the Thomas fire. Don't not to be confused with the Thomas fire,
right?
which was in Santa Barbara County a
Okay,
few years ago.
yeah,
The Thompson fire. And
yeah,
yeah, it's still burning. You sent me the update. I guess
yeah. Hmm. A
there
few
was
structures, definitely.
15
Yeah.
residences burned and
Okay.
a few non-residential subsequent structures,
Yeah, exactly. But thank
which is
God.
kind of lucky. Gosh, I mean, you look at some
Yeah,
of the other fires around here, and the area's been devastated for several
yeah.
years.
Wow. And I don't know if I guess right now there's a fire called the Lake Fire, which is up by Zaca Lake, and I saw some numbers and it was like, oh my God, it's burning like 1,000 acres per hour or some ridiculous thing. It was like, oh man, those guys are in the thick of it.
Yeah, once the wind starts blowing, it just takes off.
Yeah,
I guess we gotta thank our lucky stars, and they
right.
are firefighters, and they got emergency teams that come out from all over the state
Yeah.
to come help us out.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had a really interesting situation on. I think it was Saturday. Yeah, the day after the fourth, whatever day that was. Let me see. That would be
Friday, that would have been Friday.
well, yeah, the Friday. But somehow I came home with um, a load of water because I truck water
Uh
for
huh.
the cabin. So I had a full load of water. So I'm driving up my street and I see like some smoke, and I'm like, God, it's kind of a good little. It looks like more than a barbecue, put it that way. So I'm like,
Uh huh.
that's a little much. That's a lot of smoke. So I basically essentially drove past my the street turn off for my street, and drove straight up to this residence over a crest of a little hill, and I come over the crest and I look down and I see like a little. It was a brush fire that had started, and the neighbor had was running. He was definitely like in emergency mode, and he was grabbing a blanket and wetting it down with water. That's all he had was a wet blanket. So I'm like, hey, you need some help? He's like, I said, I got a full load of water in my truck. He said, yeah, please help me. So I just drove over to the frickin' to cross his field. He said, follow the fence line. So I followed the fence line over to the fire, and it was essentially like in a grass field, and it was what he had started as a controlled burn, but he realized his fire extinguisher was like half empty or something, so it didn't put it out, and it started to burn like it was I'd say conservatively when I got there like 15 by 15. It probably got to be 20 by 20 foot area, and I just hooked up my hose and started dumping water, but then I realized, dude, I'm not close enough to the fire. So thankfully in the back of his truck, he had a couple jugs, and I was able to fill jugs of water and literally bring it over to the edge of the fire and start putting it out with jugs of water.
The bucket brigade. Wow.
Yeah, dude.
You know,
So
that's major, bro. You
I
saved somebody, you
know.
probably potentially saved somebody's house, potentially
Yeah,
saved a forest fire. You know, that's
I
why
know.
they don't allow
Dude.
burning at a certain time of year.
Yeah, exactly. I know he didn't. It was like, it was something that he thought he could handle. But obviously he couldn't handle it because he really wasn't set up properly to handle it. And we'd been getting a lot of rain. I mean, we got 2 inches of rain a couple days prior to that. So yeah, we've been getting, I would say, abnormal monsoonal conditions, but it wasn't currently raining. It was currently sunny. We had a clear, bright, beautiful 4th of July and all that. So it definitely wasn't, you got to be conscious just barbecuing. And I saw a, sort of a public announcement about like 95% of the forest fires are caused by humans.
Yeah.
So it's like, it said something about tow chains. Watch out for make sure your tow chains aren't sparking. Of course, like, there is fire restrictions, I would say, because locally here, the fire danger at the local fire department, it says the danger is high. So we're in a high fire hazard time. So, it made me think, like, because I didn't have any jugs of water. I mean, I had a full about 275 gallons of water in my truck, thankfully, but I really had no way to pump it pressurized, to the location. and he didn't have enough hose to run 100 feet from his home, because the fire was a good 100 feet in distance, at least from his home. So he had no way, other than the saving grace of a good neighbor, myself, of putting it out, So anyways,
Oh, wow, dude.
yeah, just
The
crazy.
fact that you came up right at that time is
Yeah,
just another miracle of life.
I know,
mean,
right? Yeah.
I mean,
So,
I definitely believe in miracles.
yeah,
There
no,
was a
for
point in
sure.
my life, and in fact, maybe even still today, that I rely on miracles.
Oh,
And
right.
it's almost like I don't think I could survive without
Yeah,
miracles. And
right.
I was just so, I mean, I guess in a way it's scary goosebumps, but then the fact that you got it done, it's like, ooh, good feeling goosebumps.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it was, for a second, it was, we were working together, and I just had to quickly think, like, how am I going to do this? I mean, of course, it's like pull over there, get the water close to the location. That's step one. Step two is, how do you get the water, 30 feet from you, without any pressure? So I'm like, just thought to myself, okay, look in the back of his truck. He drove a construction work truck over to the location, and I looked in back, and he had a couple of these little, jugs of accessory things. And I'm like, I emptied out the jug, and I'm like, okay, here's a 2-gallon empty container. Now I got something to work with. So I just kept going over to my tank and filling up 2 gallons at a time, and then going over to the fire and dumping it on the edge. So there's a moment there where I know we both felt like we have to work fast, and this is not a relaxing situation. This is a, holy shit situation.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the old bucket brigade style then,
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, the bucket brigade. And I realized, like, how much, even 5 gallons, 1 gallon, every gallon counts at that point. So how do you be ready for situations like that? I guess you could say, have a full fire extinguisher on your construction work truck, and then perhaps have a bucket. That way or at least you got something to work with. Maybe a shovel would have been helpful, because it was the grass. It was that thick grass and pine needles, just as you'd imagine, like a typical field to be. And some of the grass was green, but still there was enough, old growth grass that it just was burning. So crazy.
That is crazy. Wow.
Yeah. So sometimes, obviously, I've thought about burning some paper before, but I was thinking to myself, like, more along the lines of, like, in the winter time when there's snow all around me, that would be when I would do something like that. You
Well,
know,
yeah,
like
I know that they do allow burns. They do allow burns to
yeah,
get rid of those overburden and brush, but I know that they cut it off at a certain time of year, usually
yeah,
in the later spring when things start drying up. Then they just say, okay, no more burns.
yeah.
And
No, for sure.
it's just kind of crazy, that people
People,
sometimes
yeah.
still think it's like the fireworks. Why would
I
people light
know.
fireworks when it's so dry around here, but they do it all night long?
Right. Yeah. And LA, I don't know if you've seen any of the pictures of Los Angeles, but that place just goes off the Richter scale. You know, like from our rooftops, we were viewing like these, essentially citywide, some of them are probably sanctioned by certain little cities, municipalities to do their authorized fireworks shows. So there's the authorized fireworks show, and then there's the unauthorized just mayhem that essentially starts at dark and doesn't end till like probably 2 in the morning at least. So it's a nonstop show from
Yeah,
9 to 2 a.m. at least of just going off. So you just go like, how much money? It to me, I think it's. I mean, there's old guys like us who have the gusto to do stuff like that, but I think it's a lot of 20 something, a lot of younger folks. I was going to say 20 somethings, 20 to 30 somethings who, hey, it's their prime of their life. And they're like, what are we doing? What do you got? And then it's almost like a sort of a neighborhood battle style or something on who's got the bigger case of fireworks to blow off some steam or something. So,
yeah, it is illegal, and I know back there in Grover Beach, the little municipality called Oceano, usually well known for lighting fireworks all night long. And
yeah.
the police have a little drone. So the drone goes around,
Oh,
tries to
wow.
catch the people lighting on fire, but the people tend to aim their fireworks at the drone.
Wow. That's classic.
And I
Was
know
that
that like certain
wow?
areas, like in when I was living in Templeton, they allowed the fireworks in the city park. It was right across the street from the fire station. But as soon as it got dark, it was just everyone's lighting fireworks. The whole park was going off, filled with smoke, kids running around. Um,
Yeah.
but there
Wow.
is, there's something mystical about fire in itself.
I
You sit
know.
by the campfire and you stare into it, and
I know, right.
uh,
That's the fun. That's kind of like the mellow, cool side of it all, or the interesting, mystical, like you said, aspect of fire. But fireworks are a whole nother ball game where it's like, I mean, there's one thing to have a little bottle rocket, but even then, you're dealing with something that could put out your eye, or it has that edge of that fear factor reality. I did have a friend, and he was such a gentleman, awesome friend in Los Angeles, and I believe either one or both of his hands, he had a lot of missing fingers. Put it that way. It was like he had some situation happen when he was a kid, teenager, something, some fireworks mishap, some fireworks mishap situation where he lost a lot of his fingers, man. But
yeah,
he was,
it's dangerous. When I lived up
yeah,
in Washington, they had the reservation. You could buy the big ones. 3-inch mortar balls.
wow,
And so we drove out to swim. There's a little beach. They kind of allowed people to do it, and we're lighting our fireworks. And then the guy right next door, he was using the same tube, and I guess the tube got clogged. So he would
oh,
drop the mortar and then do the initial charge to launch out, but it wouldn't launch out of the tube.
oh
And so it
shit,
exploded in the tube. And
oh,
it was kind of scary, but kind of, I had my kids with me. So I was more than
oh,
anything scared of them, but they
yeah,
were getting a kick out of it. They were like,
oh,
whoa,
right,
wow, look at they're blowing up 10 feet from us instead of
right.
20, 50, 100 feet in the sky.
Oh my God. Yeah. The thrill of all that stuff. Um, so yeah, wow. It's,
Wow, I'm totally proud of you, bro. I mean,
yeah.
that's like,
Uh,
that's like one of those things, where it's like synchronicity,
yeah,
sometimes
synchronicity.
synchronicities happen
I
and
know.
it's just so, I mean, because it could have been any time. You could have been 20 minutes before and gotten home and not seen it, or
Exactly.
20, 30 minutes after.
Right. And the funny thing is, I was driving down the road and I actually realized, oh, I forgot to mail this letter. So I actually had to take this road that right now is kind of closed. It says open for, what is it called? Local traffic only. So I took this one road, went down there, mailed my letter, got back on the road. So essentially, I did a detour, like an unexpected detour, because I forgot to mail this letter in. And that put me in a trippy schedule, like I ordinarily I would have just gone, forget it, I'll do it later, whatever. But I decided to go back, and that which was 10 minutes or so of a detour that looped me back. So the scheduling was such that as I rolled up, it had got to a point where I think it just got away from him, where by the time I got to him, he was right next to his house, wetting down a blanket, and it was like, at that point, I yelled to him, "You need help?" And he said, "Yeah, please." He's like, "Yeah, man," because he didn't have a truck like, he had a beautiful truck, like a totally professional work truck guy, but he didn't have the water tank in the back, and his water tank wasn't full, and I don't know where his water was. I mean, he had water next to his house, but in terms of thinking how to do it, I mean, he was thinking as fast as he could, how am I going to put this out myself, essentially. But by himself, it would have been really challenging, because all he had was a wet blanket and a fire extinguisher that was totally toast. So it's like,
Wow.
that wasn't quite enough to do the job. So
Now, isn't there a joke about being a wet blanket, like at a party?
So, yeah. And there is some, like, I saw some blankets they sell online or something where, maybe if you have a kitchen fire, like let's say there's a fire on your stove, that might be a way of actually extinguishing it. Just throw the blanket right over the frickin' fire. And
Yeah, one of
theoretically,
the fire blankets.
yeah,
They're
something
like
like that.
polyester or
Yeah,
mylar or some kind of
yeah.
fire proof material.
Right. So, we had one occasion in Summerland where there was a fire next to our house, because I think someone had crawled into the bushes and lit a fire at nighttime. As maybe someone who, a transient, then homeless person or something of that nature, where he had actually started another fire. So he was sort of like on maybe he was trying to keep warm, or he was just straight up like causing chaos style. I'm not exactly sure, but the eucalyptus, that stuff burns pretty hot and pretty amazing. So the fires did get, I want to say 25, 30, they're pretty high. It was climbing those eucalyptus trees in that little grove next to our house. And
Yeah.
thankfully the fire department came, and I think they parked in our driveway and ran lines. And so they had to probably run like, a good 100 feet of line to get down there and put that out. That was when I was a kid. So just in our lifetime, I mean, I think we were too young to catch the Coyote fire. There was a fire on Coyote Road a long time ago in Santa Barbara. So anyways, just because of our, I guess it's just our climate of that we're in. Southern California is known for its sunshine. So I guess fire would just kind of go along with that, because we get so much sunshine, and we're not known for massive water until recently, when we come out of drought in one season. But that's you can't count on that.
No, that's like the El Nino years, and it's just wild, because we were looking at my girlfriend Rochelle. She's like, "Oh, how are we the only fire, or how many other fires?" Something like that. And so she pulled up a fire map, and basically, it looks like the whole West Coast is on fire, from
Wow.
Oregon, all through California, Northern California, Central California, Southern California,
Wow.
up in the valleys towards the coast. It's fire, fire, fire. It is fire
Yeah.
season.
Right.
I
Wow.
know that I was reading how the Native Americans, the natives, the indigenous people would purposely set fires from time to time, kind of like
Wow.
maintenance fires. And, that makes a lot of sense, because, you're burning down some of that underbrush. You're burning certain sections at a time, so you know, okay, this part's going to go on fire, and then next year we can go, you know, be there and burn the other place. So it keeps a little maintenance. And I was also reading how, you know, some of these fire suppression things, you know, actually allow that underbrush to grow and grow several seasons, 5 seasons, 10 seasons, to where it gets really super thick and everything.
Yeah.
But you know, that's so awesome that you were able to help that neighbor. I mean, the traumatic
Totally.
excitement. I guess you got a new friend for life.
Yeah.
Neighbor.
Yeah. Seems like, you know, I didn't, you know, it seems like a nice guy. I mean, definitely has a beautiful truck. He works for some, you know, major company or something like that. So, you know, but we are sort of like, you know, we don't have water in our neighborhood. That's an interesting thing that, because usually neighborhoods have, what would you say? They would have, we do have a volunteer fire department that's probably, I would guess, as the crow flies, maybe it's only 4 miles from, maybe 3 miles from our place. So that's cool. But we don't have actual, you know, fire hydrants. There's no fire hydrants in our neighborhood. And that might be something worth kind of like in terms of, but what does that do for you? Fire hydrant just gets you a place to plug in. But you'd actually have to physically bring water up the road from the highway. And that's something interesting where in Pagosa Springs, our county, Archuleta County, there's a lot of neighborhoods with dirt roads cut in to potential neighborhoods, but I'm not 100% sure about the access to fire to water. You know.
Yeah, that can be important. You know,
Yeah.
I know that when I was looking at developing up on the hill, you know, before you want to develop, they want you to have I guess maybe a 5 or a 10,000 gallon fire tank.
Oh, wow.
So even if you got like well water, you got to make sure and keep your fire tanks full. And you know, I was looking at different properties, and that can make a huge difference. Are you connected to municipal water?
Right.
Or not? You know, is there a well or not? I know that certain communities will sometimes get together and either create a water district and connect to city water, or have a community well that kind of feeds the community.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
You know, I guess that would save a lot of money, considering how much a good well might cost, you know, 10, 20, or even $50,000 or
no,
more.
you're right. You're right on that 50 mark. I heard that 50 mark before.
Yeah, so I don't know if, you know, like a few neighbors get together, or, you know, a neighborhood thing gets together where they, you know, everybody pitches in and gets a nice well. I know that where my dad lived in Clear Lake Oaks, they had like kind of a little community water district. So it wasn't really a town. There was like one little store at the entrance from the kind of the road, you know, but it was back out of the way, and they had just a little private water district.
Right.
I think there was maybe a couple hundred homes, and they all shared in the expense of maintaining that water district for just those 200 homes.
Right. I had a friend who and unfortunately, actually, he lost a house recently in a fire in California, and his house was out in the middle of nowhere, you know, in literally grass fields. And I'm like, and he took some pictures of it you know, during the fire, and it was, you know, you could see the fire line, and it's just massive fields, acres and acres of grass, essentially. So I was like, God, and then later to see the next day, oh, my house burned down. It's like, holy crap. Like, it's weird when there's no trees involved and it's just grass burning. It seems like, man, it seems like you could fight it, but obviously you need a tremendous amount of water, or preventative, you know, fire prevention methods of sorts. Because like you said, that one day you were driving and those embers were falling, like the large ash embers. so that's a challenge because it's not only that little fire line, but that fire's actually putting out those sparks that will start fires elsewhere, essentially, I guess. So
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I think it's 100 feet, but they recommend you have a fire zone and
oh,
clear out to 100 feet or 300 feet away from your house, so
right.
that if the fire does come into your area, it has nothing to burn once it gets that close to your house, and hopefully fire is going to find somewhere to go
Yeah,
if there's any fuel for it. So
right. Challenging, super challenging. Um, so I thought of something cool for because we're on episode 66. This morning I looked up the top 10 songs of 1966. There's a few different variations on it, but it's an interesting time. I didn't write down a bunch of the songs. I do remember, of course, like Frank Sinatra is one of them, and then Question Mark and the Mysterians, and who else? Don't think I can remember anymore, but nonetheless, it's an interesting time in America in 1966. There's that transition of the early hippie days movement. Rock and roll, of course, is in full swing by 1966. So we're kind of coming up on tomorrow's episode 67. So it's sort of like, in terms of our year of birth, we're approaching both of our birth years on the show. I think.
that's
Were you?
cool.
Yeah. Were you born in 72? Was that your?
That's what it says.
Yeah, that's what.
I deny everything.
Yeah.
I
Right.
refuse to admit the truth when I'm not telling the truth. Wait, I guess if you know me personally, I'll tell you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So tomorrow's episode 67. We're looking at my birth. This coming Friday would be 1970, or it's episode 70. So nonetheless, we're coinciding with that. So it's kind of interesting to look at music and what was happening in music back then. I watched a cool show on the weekend, a little bit of it. It was I believe it's a CNN presentation of a show all about the 1980s, and then they went into the 1990s with the next show. So the 1980s were a very interesting time, of course, for us to grow up, because there was so much change going on in television, for one, pushing the boundaries of what was entertaining for us, because our parents lived in a quite different world than we did when they were kids. So I'm sure it's sort of the same thing happening again with the youth that are below us. They're living in sort of a mashup of all these decades of music, where we lived through, like, for example, I saw another show on the disco era, and how the the freaking disco scene
The
started to take.
70s.
Yeah, the 70s. The disco scene took over for a second, and all these channels switched over to nothing but disco. And then there was a DJ disc jockey somewhere back east, I think, who did this big disco sucks, or the disco sucks movement or something like that. And he actually did a record burning at a big stadium, and there was a lot of people that backed that. And then disco had like a little bit of a backlash, because it wasn't favored by everybody. Of course, it was but the market, it became like a marketing thing that was like, even if the music sucked, it was still disco, so they kind of threw it in there. There was a song called.
You gotta give it up for the fashion of the disco era, though.
I know, right?
It's so interesting because, like,
Yeah.
you start with. I'm just looking at like the 50s, the
Mhm.
Motorheads, and the hot
Yeah.
rod, the hot
Yeah,
rods,
the hot rods.
and the rockabilly kind of sound, and then
Yeah.
the 60s you got the hippies, and then the
Right.
70s you got the disco, but they had
Right.
the bell bottom pants like the hippies did, and then
Right.
it's just,
So
as these modern things come up, it kind of just conglomerates and separates and stratifies in different ways, to where there's
yeah.
always the classic um look, and then there's little modifiers on the classic look, and then there's the extreme new. You look at goth. Well, you take classic
Yeah.
black clothing, and black is always going to be a classic, formal wear, and then you
Yeah.
throw in a little bit of goth, but then you got the spikes, right? The goth spikes.
Yeah.
Well, meddlers wore the spikes too. So it's I really enjoy how there's like a little crossover from trends and fashion, and it's like
absolutely
colored 70s t-shirts, and well, doesn't that
right.
translate to like the 40s, with the zoot suit guys and stuff? The baggy pants or the zoot suits. Well, what about the 80s hip hop? The MC Hammer pants. So it was just
I know, right? Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a fun little, I've been, it's just interesting to like look back on our lives, for sure. So.
Well, God bless you, Jericho, for stopping and helping your friend and being there at the right time to help your neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where you see it and it's like, don't drive by an accident with a car on fire. I mean, hopefully it makes you want to be more prepared to help in situations if you can help. Be a helpful person. I literally drove to the danger zone instead of driving away from it and going, someone's got it under control and driving away. I'm like, no, I better check this out. This looks too ridiculous to not be maybe the nosy neighbor thing is actually kind of good sometimes if your neighbor's willing to help you,
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And just imagine if you had just driven by and then 2 hours later, you're like, oh, Mom, Dad, we have to evacuate. The fire's coming over the hill.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's really literally as it sits. That we're only like 1 mile from that guy. So
I guess in a way it's common sense, and I guess it's, if you're helping yourself and helping your neighbors and helping your community, it's going to uplift not only yourself and your neighbors, but your community. And then later on, hopefully the community will lift you up. Who knows? Maybe that guy you'd be like, you know what? Here, I got a job for you. Maybe you found your new job.
I know. You never know, man. You never know. Exactly. So that's what's up. Summertime's here. It's July 8th, 2024. Wow, man. Episode 66, bro. Cheers to 66.
Cheers, 1966.
Yeah.
I've been forgetting to say ta-ta for now, but take
yourself. Yeah, ta-ta for now.
Smash the like, follow, blah, like I care.
All that good stuff. Yeah, exactly. Totally. All right, man. I'll hang out for a bit after the show. Click us off whenever you're ready.
I'm done. Say bye-bye.
Okay.